of from College of Business and Economics. This is my 6th year at College of Business. My teaching and research areas are, related to organizational behavior, industrial psychology, organizational psychology, and things like that. So, if, for instance, as we move on to the workshop, and you will see that at some point in time, I'll be raising certain questions or certain points for discussion. So if you want to participate, please raise your hand, and I will call your name, and then you can participate. So this way, like, we will have less disturbance, and we will make sure that one person is talking at one point in time. Okay. So today we are going to talk about influence and persuasion skills. As all of you know, that this is one of the important skill which we require, not in our only in our work life, but even in our, daily life. Sometime we have to influence and persuade our kids. Sometimes we have to influence and persuade our, friends. Sometimes we have to influence and persuade our parents, and so on and so forth. And sometimes people feel that influence and persuasion is an art, which means like this is driven by your own personality characteristics, and you need to have some type of like personality traits in order to exercise these skills. But at the same time, now we have ample evidence in academic literature which suggests that if we take care of certain things, certain psychological principles, because at the end we are dealing with humans, and more or less, humans, they are like, they have same psychology, and they are driven by, more or less, although there are some individual differences, but more or less they are driven by same factors. And there are some broader psychological principles which sometimes we may use to persuade and influence others. So in this session, what we are going to do, we are going to talk about those psychological principles, which probably you can use in your daily life. I don't make a promise that by the end of this workshop, you will be a super duper influencer, or you would be very good in, persuasion skills. But it will give you, this workshop will give you some, a basic idea that how can you use those skills. And as we all know that with practice, skills get improved. No matter what type of skills we are talking here, if you are a footballer, you are a swimmer, the more you practice, the more good you would be at exercising those skills. So once you know these principles which we are going to talk about here, then the next thing is you need to develop an action plan for yourself, and you try using those in your daily life. And the more you use, the more you would be better at developing and acquiring and polishing those skills. But the first step is we need to know those. So that is the main purpose of this workshop. Okay. So how do we define persuasion? That is a bookish definition. Basically, this is an attempt to change attitudes or behaviors, or both, without using coercion or deception. This is what we meant by persuasion and influence. So basically, we want to change attitudes and behaviors of other party, but without using any force, without using any deception. So basically, what I already mentioned, that we are trying to look at, we are going to use psychological principles. So as I just mentioned, that sometimes people think it's an art, sometimes, but at the same time, I believe that this is not an art, this is a science. As I already mentioned, that we have well-established evidence in the literature which suggests that if we use those scientific principles, we can be a good, we can be good at persuasion and influencing others. Okay. So we are, the next then question comes that how can we make people comply to our request? Again, we are going to talk about some psychological principles which we can use to make people comply to our requests. Okay. Now, typically, the literature suggests that there are 6 influence tactics, and sometimes people call them the weapons of influence. These 6 principles are proposed by an a social psychologist, or Robert Cialdini. I don't know, you might have heard his name, but he's very well known scholar in the field of influence and persuasion. And if anyone of you who is interested more in knowing that, he has written a book on this, and the name of the book is that's a bestseller book, and the name is Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion. And if I can show you the book, like this is the book. So can you see the book on your screen? Or no?
Yes, doctor.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So this is the book. If those of you who would like to know more about, this is a must read. And what I'm going to talk about here, I'm going to basically summarizing that what's written in this book. And then I'll be relating it back to our daily life, our organizational or work life, that how can you use these principles at your workplace or in your daily life. So this is a bestseller by Robert Cialdini. Uh, if you read this, that's a very easy to read, super duper book with ample, scientific evidence that how can you use these techniques. Okay, so the 6 principles, first we are going to talk about 6 principles, and then there are 2 or 3 more tips we are going to talk in addition to these 6 principles. Okay, so the first principle is reciprocity. Now, as the name suggests, reciprocity means that if you do good to someone, in return you will get good. So this is a one-liner definition that what I mean, or what Robert Cialdini meant by reciprocity. Now, for instance, the crux of reciprocity is, as a human being, we should try to repay what another person has provided us. Basically, for example, if you look around, if someone offers you a gift or gives you a gift at your birthday, you always feel an internal pressure that whenever his or her birthday comes, like you feel an internal pressure to repay that gift. If someone offers you a free coffee one day, maybe another day, if you again meet that person in a coffee shop, probably you feel an internal pressure that this time you should be offering him or her a free coffee. Similarly, for instance, if someone sent you a birthday card, or like for example, if we look if we look around, if someone comments or likes your Facebook pictures which you upload, or like your post on Facebook, you feel an internal pressure that whatever next time that person is posting on the Facebook, no matter that's a post, that's a picture, you tend to like that. Sometimes even if you don't feel like, but you feel some internal pressure, and you think that, oh, this is the person XYZ who liked my pictures, who liked my post, who made comments. So you tend to do that. Now, this is reciprocity. Because as a human being, this is our psychology, that whosoever does something good to us, we tend to repay that back. So this is the basic idea of the principle. And the idea now behind reciprocity is that the favor that person is doing to you, that should be uninvited favor, which means you should not have asked for that. So you have not asked for that, you are not expecting that favor, and that person has done it to you, or is doing it to you. Now that kind of uninvited favor, or that kind of uninvited, gift or invitation or whatever you call it, that triggers a feeling of indebtedness. That triggers a feeling of, a feeling of internal pressure through which we tend to repay that. Uh, Now, can we see any examples of reciprocity around? Of course, yes. As I just, narrated few examples here, but if you look around, that sometimes we fall victim to this reciprocity principles. Now, for instance, how? You enter a shop with an intention of maybe, just window shopping, but a person serves you a free cold drink, a person serves you a free juice, a person serves you maybe a free, coffee. Now, at the end, once you have, you, you, you have accepted that favor of free coffee or cold drink, you feel an internal pressure that you should buy this thing. Sometimes this happens to us because we sometimes feel bad that, now I have, taken this coffee. Now it looks bad if I don't buy anything. So, this is the pressure which we feel, and this is the influence tactics which people are using. Sometimes you see these, free tasting at hypermarkets. So you go, you taste, and then you feel bad that if I don't buy this. And that's why you see that people, these companies are using this principle to influence us in their, marketing, or sales strategies. Similarly, like free samples, diaries, calendars, souvenirs, these kind of things. All these things are basically tools which companies and organizations are using to influence us or to guide our behavior. Similarly, what I already told you, what I already mentioned is the gift which we get on marriages, birthdays, or other parties. And if those are uninvited, we tend to repay, those back. So this is how we human beings are programmed. Uh, this is how nature has programmed. Like for most of us, we tend to behave in that way. Uh, Now, why it should be that a small first favor often stimulate large return favor. So whenever, when we return, we tend to return that favor, that uninvited favor which someone has extended to us. Why sometimes we indulge in returning in a much, a larger return favor. And the reason for this is because of feeling of indebtedness, because of, if we don't do that, we will feel internal discomfort. We will say, oh, I have not, I have not repaid that favor. If someone, invited you for a dinner or lunch at your home, probably, you tend to repay that. You also tend to invite that person one day at your home. And sometimes, we also do that because of the fear of external shame. We will say that if I don't repay this favor, what other person will think about me? What other, my other colleagues, they will think about me, and I will earn a bad repute, and this would impact, my, goodwill. So these are all internal and external. Internal means which are internal to you, internal to your own cognition, and external means which are external to, like, societal pressures. So all these factors, they lead us in a specific direction in order to repay that favor which has already been extended by one of our colleague or friend or sibling or whosoever. Okay. Now, there's a very well-known incident which has been reported in this book, is about the fundraising of Krishna Society. Uh, Now, Krishna Society was like formed somewhere in 1960s, and they were doing fundraisings. And if you look at this picture, this is the typical way they used to do the fundraisings in 1960. But that technique miserably failed, like they used to beat these drums and music and, walks in streets and on different roads and try to do the fundraising, but that didn't work for them. Now, with a minor change in this strategy, they were able to generate or raise a lot more funds what they used to do in the beginning. And what change they made in their strategy, that they just threw away these, drums and pianos and music and stuff like that. Now, what they were doing, most of their volunteers were standing outside the airport. And whenever a person, a traveler comes out of the airport, they used to offer him or her a flower, a simple red flower. And whenever they just offer him or her a flower, the person takes the flower and then they say that, can you please, we are from Krishna Society, can you please just give us $1 bill or, $5 or $2, whatever. And this technique helped them a lot. And that flower was of no use to the travelers who were receiving those flowers. Most of the time people just used to throw them into the dustbins just around the corner. And later on, they found that these volunteers, they used to pick the same flowers from the bins and were giving it to the next passenger or traveler who was coming out of the airport. But that technique helped them a lot in raising the funds. And if you look back, that how they were influencing or what technique they were using, that was reciprocity. That was the uninvited favor which they were extending to a person. And in return, once you accept the flower, you fell prey to this technique, this principle. It's just like that when you do this free tasting in the hypermarkets, you always feel an internal pressure to buy that stuff. So this is how they did. So you see that it's again a psychological principle, but very successful. Okay, now related to reciprocity, there is another technique which is reject and retreat. Now, for example, let me ask you a question. Suppose you want me to agree to host a free coffee for participants of this workshop. What would be an appropriate way to increase your chances of success? Anyone from the class? Anyone who would like to answer this question? Suppose you want me to agree to host a free coffee for participants of this workshop. What would be an appropriate way to increase your chances of success?
To link it to the number of attendees.
To link it to the number of attendees?
Because you're presenting this and your objective is to present to a wider audience. So I'm telling you, if you want wider audience to present, maybe you can offer them a free coffee.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I think you might have seen this happening around as well, Dr. Hadi. Dr. Hadi, nice to see you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Al-Karim. Nice to see you as well. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. Now, can you see my slides?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now, one way of doing this is, like there are multiple ways, but one way of doing this is sometimes, you pitch a larger request and then you retreat to a smaller request in order to get accepted. For example, if you want me to host a coffee for you, maybe you can start with lunch. You can say, Doctor, why don't you host a lunch for all of us? We want you to, host a lunch for us. And I say, oh, no, it would be, not feasible. It's not feasible. I can't do that. And then you say, okay, Dr. Khalas, don't host a lunch for us. Let's agree on coffee. Now, there's a good likelihood that I would agree, which means that you have retreated from your original position to a more moderate position. Now, this would give me a signal that you are giving me a favor, you are giving me concession. And in return, again, this reciprocity principle is at play here. I would say, yeah, this class is giving me a favor, and I should also give them a favor. And the favor is that I should agree to their request. So sometimes people do that. For example, if you want to proceed on 2 weeks holiday, you go to your manager, but you don't ask for 2 weeks. You say that you want to go for 1 month holiday. He say, oh, it's difficult. Then so, okay, you say, okay, if it's difficult, so uh, maybe I can manage it in 2 weeks. And then he says, okay. Now, again, this is, if you looked at what's happening in the mind of your boss, is that he or she would think that you are giving him or her a favor and you of 2 weeks because you have retreated from your original position of 1 month to 2 weeks. And then he would feel an internal pressure to accept your request uh, and try to repay that favor by accepting the request. Now, this technique is called rejection then retreat technique. Rejection then retreat. So this is also, if you look behind, reciprocity is being played at the back end. Now, how can you use this principle in your daily life? Now, the first thing is do uninvited favors to people around you. Small favors, birthday wish, good morning, telling someone, oh, wow, today you are looking great. You look fantastic. Now, these kind of things. Maybe some small gifts. If you traveled and on way back you brought some small souvenirs, some small gift. Now, these kind of uninvited favors, whenever next time you pitch your request to those individuals, there's a good likelihood that if we use this principle, that person is going to accept your request. Now, this second line, again, I've copied this from this book, but I'm not sure that how good this works in collectivist cultures, like the kind of culture we live in. The author says that, Robert Cialdini says that whenever you extend a favor to someone and someone says thank you, now instead of saying no problem, you should say, sure, I know you would do the same for me. Now, I don't know that how comfortable like we feel, by saying this, but in Western culture, this is very common. People who use this principle, uh, whenever they extend a favor to someone and someone says thank you, instead of saying no problem, they sometimes say, sure, I know you would do the same for me. I know you would reciprocate this to me. Now, these kind of thing means you are signaling that person that he or she needs to repay that favor back to you. So this is another technique which probably we can think of. And the third one is, which we just talked about, rejection and retreat, is pitch the larger request first and then retreat to a smaller one. Now, in this case, you have a good, a likelihood that your request would be accepted. So this is all about the reciprocity principle. Now, the second principle through which people get influenced is commitment and consistency. Now, if you look at the definition of this principle, it says that as a human being, we want to be seen as logical and consistent once we have committed to something. And none of us would like to be seen as inconsistent. Now, for example, if I'm teaching a class, evening session, and the first day I gave prayer break to students, Okay, I say, okay, this is Maghrib prayer break, and let's take a break for 20 minutes. Now, from next class onwards, there would be an internal pressure on me to do the same. And the reason is because I did something in the first class and did it publicly. So if I don't do it in the second class, people would say that what kind of professor he or she is. That look that we thought that he is, taking care of religious sentiments, religious beliefs, and he is giving us a prayer break. But he turned out to be otherwise. Next class, he didn't give us any break. So if a normal human being would tend to engage in those actions which are in sync or which are aligned with his or her previous actions. Because as a human being, we would like to be seen as consistent. We don't want people to talk about, ourselves that we are inconsistent. Uh, and this, we feel more pressure to be seen as consistent when we commit something publicly. Now, for example, if I commit in front of this group that I will offer a free coffee to the participants, if we are on campus. Uh, so it would be very hard for me to back out from this. The reason is I committed this thing publicly. And when I commit something to just one individual, maybe I say to Dr. Hadi that, or Dr. Ala that, I would offer you a free coffee. It would be, I will not feel much pressure to honor my commitment when I do it maybe in front of one or two individuals. So sometimes, people like we see that this principle is at play and to get ourselves influenced. Now, for example, just to give you an example from history, what happened during the Korean War, the Chinese, they used to get compliance from American prisoners of war without using any force, without using any other tactics. They were just playing with this commitment and consistency tactic. Now, the idea was that start with small and then build on that. And how they did that, they were asking prisoners of war to make small statements that are so mildly in nature, anti-American statements. Now, for instance, statements like America is not a perfect place to live, for instance. And because the prisoner of war, they didn't feel any, any problem with that statement because none of the country or none of the place on this, planet is perfect place to live. So they were comfortable in making this statement that America is not a perfect place to live. So then they built on this. And then next they pushed prisoner of wars to related yet little bit more substantive request. For example, can you think some of the ways that in which America is not a perfect place to live? So they pushed people thinking to think of cases uh, where like they can say that America is not a perfect place to live. And then they ask them, okay, now you can think of those ways. Can you please make a list of those problems and sign your name on it? And once that list is prepared and a person has signed it, they asked individuals to read it to the group. So they were using this principle because sometimes if you commit something in front of one or two individuals, it's easy to negate. But when you are reading it in front of a group, you feel more pressure to carry it forward. And then, they ask them to write an essay expanding on this list. And then, Chinese then used this essay in anti-American radio with the name of the person who used to do that. So you can see that they started with a very small thing, which is very mild in nature, very minor in nature, and then they built on that. And why prisoner of war at some point in time had no to way to go back or to decline because they already committed. They said, okay, America is not a perfect place to live. And then they build on that. And this consistency principle was at play there. Now there's another example. This was the experiment which was done in Iowa, a winter energy conversation campaign. Basically, they wanted citizens to save energy during winters. And what they did, so they tried, that was a kind of experiment they did with two group of citizens, and these were the findings. Now, for examples, um, a researcher or interviewer, he contacted a group of residents in Iowa and asked them and gave them some energy conversation tips and asked them that they need to save energy in future. They all agreed like this is very good and we should do. But after 1 month, there was no improvement in the bills. The energy consumption was same. Now, on a comparable sample, uh, the researcher tried something slightly different. They asked the residents that if you save energy, we will publicize your name in newspaper. And we will publicize your name in newspaper and we will give you a title of public spirited or fuel conserving citizens. Now, once this was told to the other group, and at the end of the month, once they looked at their bills, they found that the impact was there, and they found almost 12.2% energy saving. Okay. Now, next month's what they did, they wrote back to those people by saying that it would not be possible to publicize their names after all. Now, if we think logically, we expect that month after that, people would return to their earlier wasteful habits. Because once we have promised something that your name would be published in the newspaper and those names were not there, you are not titled as energy saving citizens, there's a good likelihood that you will return to your previous habit. But this was not the case. But they found that they conserved more fuel that they had during their time when they were promised that their name would be in the newspaper, like 15.5% versus 12.2%. Now, how do we explain this? Now, this can easily be explained based on the commitment and consistency principle, because they committed something and then they indulge in that habit and they want it to be seen as consistent. They wanted to be seen as committed individuals. So from that perspective, they did not go back to their earlier habits. Okay. Now, how can we use this principle around in our daily life, in our work life? For instance, we can spend time in securing small commitments. Small commitments from whom? Small commitments from our team members, small commitments from our colleagues whom we are dependent on, or whom we want their help in one of our projects. So this is one thing, because when you secure small commitment, people will tend to build on that, and later on if you ask for a larger commitments, people are going to most likely they are going to comply with that. The second is, if you are doing this securing small commitments, do it publicly in a group setting, because once people commit in front of a group, there is a very less likelihood that they would not honor their commitments, because they have social pressure that they have to honor that commitment. And sometimes, the good companies, what they do, they ask their employees to write those commitments. Now, commitments means objectives, goals, whatever name you give it to it. Write it in a piece of paper and put it on a wall in front of them on their desk. Now, that writing part always helps people to remind them that this is what they agreed to, this is what they committed to. And now they feel, when it is written in front of them, they feel more pressure to honor that commitment. So these are some of the ways through which you can use this influence principle to make people or to secure commitments from people, to make people work according to your own requirements, and reiterate commitments at team or department meeting. Again, this is the same thing, because once someone is committed, in the next meeting after that, reinforce those commitments, that Dr. Hadi committed that he is going to complete this project by next month. Now, then Dr. Hadi would feel a pressure to do that. So these kind of small techniques help you influence and persuade people towards desired goals. Okay. The third principle is social proof. Now, for example, you might have seen in these comedy movies that there's a canned laughter. Now, why canned laughter is so popular with television executives? Uh, because they want us to laugh. They want us to give a signal that this is something funny. And this canned laughter is built on this social proof principle. Now, for example, uh, you might have seen, because in this country we don't have this if you go to these Starbucks and other coffee shops, we don't have this culture of tipping. But if you go to states, you say, if you don't tip like this, sometimes consider that you are rude. They sometimes consider that you don't have manners. So once, if you're taking a coffee from Starbucks, you will always see a transparent jar or glass with some dollar bills inside it. You will never notice that that jar or glass is non-transparent. That is always transparent, always made of glass, always see-through. Similarly, if you might have seen these charity boxes, Red Cross or other charity, organizations, like, their boxes are always transparent, and you never ever see their boxes are empty. If you walk into Starbucks early morning, even if you are the first customer in states, you would see that glass is always, like, it has some dollar bills or some pennies inside it. Similarly, the charity boxes are never empty. There are some bills which are left in that. Why is it so? Have you thought about that? That even if the start of the day, it's not empty. Anyone? Any answer or explanation to what I'm asking?
Maybe it can give like a feeling you are not only the first customers, and they work in a continuous way.
Okay.
Could
It's
be.
obviously also, yeah, sorry, Ala. It's obviously also a way to encourage others to participate, and then you want to be unseen, like, being stingy or something. So you want to contribute like others are doing. So
Okay, good. Uh, what happens, that if we are, as a human being, we are in unfamiliar situation where we are not sure that what is the right behavior, what typically we do, we look towards general public, that what they are doing, and we assume that what they are doing, that's the right behavior. Now, for instance, if you are sitting in a ceremony, and when the chief guest arrives, you see that most of the people, they were sitting, but when the chief guest arrives, in respect, they stood. Now, probably you don't see this culture in maybe states in West, but if you are here, sometimes we do that. And the reason is, if you are new, what is the likelihood? Likelihood is, when you see people around you, they are standing, you would also stand, right? And the reason, yes, Hadi, why we do that?
yeah, we like to compile and be part of a bigger group of doing something.
Yes,
So we don't want to
exactly.
be the outliers or the only
Yes,
different person. Yes.
exactly. So the idea is that we don't want to be seen different what others are doing. And because we are new to that context, and that is the first time, that is an unknown situation to us. We have never encountered that in our life. So in order to assess or gauge that what is the right response, right behavior in that context should be, we look towards general public. Okay. When there's a national anthem, we all stand. And if I don't know that I should be sitting or standing, I look around, and if see that the person in the next rows are standing, I would automatically stand. And this is how, as a human being, we are programmed, that when we are unsure about our own actions, we look towards general public to see that what is the right behavior in that particular context. Now, typically this happens, that why the Starbucks staff in States or in West have see-through, these jars for tips, and why don't those jars are never empty? Because if you are new to that context, if you are a traveler and you have arrived there from different part of world, and you don't know that what is the right behavior, that dollar bills would give you a feeling that this is the right behavior. I also need to put in a dollar bill. Uh, so this is how this technique, and this technique is, or this principle is known as social proof. So companies are using this, and on the next slides, I'll give you a few more examples that how come sometimes we fell, victim to this technique. Okay, so do we find such examples around us? As I gave you a few examples that sometimes we try to influence. For example, just to give you another example, uh, sometimes these credit card selling agents, they come to me and they ask me, okay, this is the form, just sign here and we will fill it for you. I'll fill it once I go back to my office. I sometimes don't feel comfortable that, I'm just signing it and this person would fill it on my behalf. I don't know what he or she is going to do. But then he shows me some other blank form, say that, look, your colleagues, he signed in a similar way, and this is how people typically do. And then, I just like feel comfortable. I don't know, like this is not the right practice, but sometimes I just sign it by assuming that so many other people are doing this, and that might be the right behavior, or that might be safe to do this because people around me are doing this. So sometimes, like, people use this, they tend to tell you that, look, others are also doing in a similar way, and then you feel a pressure, and then you feel more comfortable in accepting their arguments or in doing that. Now, for example, you might have seen this McDonald's hamburgers over 19 billion served, or you might have read this on these different packaging material, over 10,000 units sold. You also see this on different websites, uh, 8,000 users or 8,000 visitors today. Now, why companies typically do that? And the reason is they just tend to give you, they are using this social proof, tactic to let you know that this is something authentic, this is something which a lot of other people are doing, so you should also do that. So this is how sometimes we get influenced when we read these numbers, that over 10,000 units sold, over 60,000 customers served. Now these numbers then give us more confidence to go for that product or service. So again, you see that this is, the companies are using this social proof principle.
Yeah, Professor, if I may, this is interesting. I mean, I'm going to use an example of.
Yeah, please go ahead. This is
Yeah,
very good if you share your examples. Yeah.
Pandemic is allowing us to notify and realize that nowadays, if you walk out of your house without a mask, you feel that you're walking naked outside your house.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there is the commitment, towards this social proof again. Everybody's doing it,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So the other day I forgot, and I went off my car with my kids to the mall, and then people are running after me actually, and it's like, excuse me, and I start getting scared, like I'm running away from them.
Yes.
They're trying to save me. I say, here's a mask, here's a mask. Thank you guys,
Yes.
but you scared me. Everybody's running after me. So yeah,
Yes. That,
social proof. Nowadays, if you walk out without a mask, you feel that you're doing something. So there's
yes,
people. This is driving a lot of people to commit to
yes.
having this extra protection and protecting others and yourself by wearing the mask. Maybe you're not convinced. Maybe you don't want to do it, but you think everybody's going to be looking at me.
Yeah. Perfect example. And I can give you another example, which is other way around. During this winter break, I went back to Pakistan, and I went to my village, which is a hilly area in Pakistan, and I was attending a marriage ceremony there, and I was the only one who was putting on the mask. And after 2 minutes, I just removed my mask and put it because everyone was staring at me and looking at me that, "Hey, look, this guy is putting on a mask."
Yeah, he's sick. He's sick. Stay away from
Yeah,
him.
you see. So like this is the other way around, because this is how
Doing the right thing at the wrong place. Yeah.
yes. Exactly.
Oh my God.
So the principle is that we always look around to understand that what is the correct behavior in a given situation, and majority of the time we assume that it is safe to go with the crowd. It is safe to go with what others are doing, and this typically happens when we are confronted with new situations, ambiguous situations. We are not sure about our own actions, and we typically look towards similar others. So ambiguous situation and similar others are the key component here which drive the social proof. Okay, how can we use social proof in our daily life? For example, you can emphasize others' actions. You can say, okay, Mr. Bilal, the expert in accounting systems, gave me an hour of his time. Okay. Now, for example, if someone comes to you and say that I'm a selling agent, I just met and you say, oh, maybe I don't have time, but he says, I just met your Mr. Bilal, who is your department chair, who is your boss, and he gave me an hour of his time. You start questioning your own judgment that then this guy might have some useful information, because he has been given 1 hour by the top guy. He has been given 1 hour by the guy maybe who is expert on XYZ. And then you get influenced, and you tend to give you are more inclined to talk to him or her. So like just by adding one single sentence to your request, that altogether change the perception of the other person. Now, sometimes, if, for example, you are presenting a proposal, and you can always say that, okay, the vice president of finance has committed resources to this project. Now, this is the tone which you set. Now, this gives confidence to other people that maybe this project is worthwhile, that other people, they or the VP of finance is committing resources to this project. So the idea is that whenever you are floating a new proposal, try to get sign-offs from heavy hitters first. Try to get buy-in from those people whom people regard as trustworthy, whom people regard as expert in that particular field. Now, these kind of things then give a feeling to other people that maybe this is the right thing, or this project has no loopholes because this has been accepted by X, Y, Z. So these kind of like tactics, like there is nothing wrong with doing this, but it is just the order, it is just the way of doing that. So that might help you, in changing the perception of people around you towards your proposal, towards your suggestion, whatever you are saying. Okay. Similarly, you can prepare and set the tone for an important meeting by mentioning that you have already committed to your proposal. Now, again, this is the principle of social proof. If you mention in the beginning that this proposal has been discussed with, my colleagues, they all liked it, they agreed to this. I also discussed it with the marketing department, GM marketing. He also liked it very much. Now, this would give an indication to people to whom you are presenting that this is something which is viable. This is something which is useful. And so basically you are influencing their mind in your favor. The fourth principle is authority. Now, for example, as a human being, we tend to accept instructions, we tend to accept suggestions from those people whom we think are authority in that particular field. Now, for example, sometimes we blindly believe in doctor's opinion because, and if you read, this medicine literature, like I was reading in one of the paper, like 16% deaths in states, United States, where you have a very strong regulatory system, happens due to misdiagnosis and due to misprescriptions by doctors. Now, but even then, we sometimes blindly believe in doctor's opinion, whatever he or she is saying to us, we blindly believe that and we think that's the ultimate truth. The reason why we do that, because we feel that that person is an authority as far as my health matters are concerned. Now, same thing can happen in other domains of life as well. For example, if we walk into a new restaurant, why we ask the waiter or the server to recommend us some dish? Because we consider him or her an authority, we consider him or her that he or she has been working in this restaurant since long. So whatever we are assuming that whatever he or she is recommending would be recommending us, that would be a true opinion. Now, for example, the principle says that people feel compelled to follow an authority because sometimes even if the things go wrong, you can put the blame on authority. And in order for a person to look like an authority figure, you should look trustworthy and you should be an expert in your field. For example, if you are an accounting expert, and if people think that you are an authority in accounting systems, you should be expert in that. Sometimes people use titles, like doctor. I still remember, I had one DBA student who was doing, his DBA dissertation with me. And when I asked him, he was a fantastic student. When I asked him that, he used to do a lot of these trainings for companies around. And when I asked him that, why you have so much knowledge and you are, excellent, why you want to do this DBA? Why you are, paying so much money and you are just focus on your, business? And he told me that, look, I don't have this title of doctor. And even if I tell people fantastic things, they don't believe me. But whosoever who has this title of doctor with his or her name, he or she tells them ordinary things, they clap for, him or her. You see? So, and I just want to have this, a title with my name so that my, whatever I'm saying that carries more weight. So this is how, we human beings tend to put, more weight on titles. And we tend to, consider sometimes these titles that person is an authority. And sometimes you see that people using all these, their qualifications, certifications, their associations in their signatures on their visiting cards, just to make other people feel that you know too much about this subject, you are an authority. And these things, sometimes work. Otherwise, if you don't introduce yourself, and I think there is no harm in that, if you have, because, it's all the game of perceptions. When you talk to people, this is how they perceive you. And sometimes, they are just perceiving you that you are someone maybe with an ordinary skill level, ordinary knowledge. But if you have all those things mentioned on your visiting card, probably the tone of the individual you will feel that gets changed. And the reason is a person get influenced with the titles, with the qualifications, whatever you are mentioning on your visiting card, and your whatever you are saying now, that would carry more weight. So some with the title, sometimes people use title to convey a signal that you are an authority. Sometimes, the clothes, like for example, why doctors always put on this white gown when we see them in the hospital, or why army has a specific uniform, why police has a specific uniform. And then the reason is that this signals that you are an authority. Now, how can you use this principle around? Appearance of an expert, the same thing which I mentioned, that title, qualifications, those should be highlighted in your maybe email signatures, on your visiting cards, on your letterhead, or in your company communication, on website and things like that. And if you don't get a chance or if the situation is such that you are not able to present the documented stuff, you can always mention your accomplishments in the conversation. And believe me that makes the difference. The other party's tone towards what you are saying, that gets changed, because now your perception in the mind of other party would be of an expert, would be of an authority. And that would give other party a signal that you already know a lot about this specific aspect. Okay, sometimes, people tend to trust you when you appear trustworthy. And sometimes it's not always, sometimes it is a good idea to present the weaknesses first, your weaknesses, because as a human being, we all have weaknesses. And other party, that gives a signal to the other party that you are trustworthy, you are credible. Okay, the fifth principle is liking. As a human being, we tend to accept the requests from those whom we like. We all have our own biases. We are not machines, we are not computers. So based on those likings, perceptions, stereotyping, we tend to accept requests from those individuals whom we like more as compared to the individuals whom we like less. Now, the rule is we say yes to people we know and like. Now, what are the components in liking? Physical attractiveness, so like you have to dress properly. If you dress properly, you're always smiling. Now, these things people tend to like. They say, oh, this person is a very, pleasant personality, always smiling, says good morning to everyone. Whenever he or she meets us, he, asks, how are you? Are you okay? And things like that. Now, these small tips that ultimately, works as a liking principle. Similarities. We tend to accept requests and from those people who are similar to us. Now, similar in terms of opinions, similar in terms of personality traits, similar in terms of backgrounds, similar in terms of lifestyle, similar in terms of maybe you study from the same institution, your alma mater is same, things like that. Compliments, which I already mentioned, that people tend to like those people who give them compliments, who tell them, wow, you look great, good morning, and so these small things. And familiarity, so people whom we are familiar with. Now, how can you use liking principle? Spend some time getting to know people, because You can only develop connections. You can only establish similarities with people if you know them. If you know about their interests, and then if you have the same interests, so if that thing overlaps, the liking thing would automatically develop. Institution that would only come into picture if you talk to people, if you know them. So don't only focus on your work, whatever is assigned to you by the organization. Rather, also spend some time in knowing the people around you. Sometimes you can invite someone for lunch, like for that little chit chat that always helps to that always helps to know people and to create friendships. Again, find out common interests between you and other people. The last principle is scarcity. As a human being, we tend to put more weight on an item which is scarce and we desire it. And this typically happens when there is more competition for scarce resources. And and I'm going to talk about this more, the loss thing, because scarcity gives us a signal of loss, that we may lose this thing and someone else might gain. So the resources are scarce, and there are maybe two things, but we are 5 individuals who are aiming for that. Now that scarcity and sense of competition motivate us to go for that. So whenever someone signals that this is a scarce resource, we tend to grab it as soon as possible if we desire for it. Now, for example, we see this principle around us so many times. For example, the property dealers, even for example, you go to this booking.com or other airline websites, you see why they mention only 4 seats left. They're using this scarcity principle. Why they are mentioning that only 2 rooms left? Maybe there are 20, but they just mentioned 2. The reason is they are playing with your psychology to use this scarcity principle. You would say, oh, only 2 seats left and I need to travel. Maybe prices are going to rise, and you book for it immediately. Same thing happens when you want to book maybe a hotel room. Sometimes you see only last room left and things like that. Property dealers, who are selling you, maybe houses. You want to you want to take a house on rent. They say you, okay, there are 6. I have 3 more parties coming in the evening, and okay, your deal is good, but let me talk to them, and if they offer me a better deal, I'll give it to them. Now this automatically will give you a signal that maybe he is going to give it to them. There are 3 more parties for this house as well. So altogether your perceptions get changed. Sometimes the car dealers, they also use the same. This is the last piece we have, and we are expecting so many bookings next week, so you might not get this next week. All these kind of conversations is basically the scarcity principle is being used to influence and persuade us. Okay, so how can you use this scarcity principle? Because one of the underlying theme, as we mentioned, is that the human beings are more motivated by fear of loss as compared to fear of gains. This is how we are programmed. This is how human beings are programmed. So whenever you are pitching some idea, something, try to highlight the potential losses rather than the gains. Now, for example, let me give you a scenario. A representative from your local power company comes to you, maybe this a land distribution company comes to your neighborhood, offering energy audits to homeowners. You agree to the audit, after which the representative advises you to invest in products and services that will help insulate your home and lower your energy costs. Now I'm giving situations, and you will see that in which situations people are likely to say yes. Both situations are conveying the same. The outcome is same, but conveying a different message. So you just for example, the first is now this again. This description is uh, from an from a social experiment which was done with citizens, and more people come to number to your home, you will lose X cents per day. And the underlying reason that why more people committed to this statement, not the first one, otherwise both are telling the same, the crux is same. But when you are using the word loss and fail, people get more motivated to they get more influenced, they get more persuaded to move in that direction. You can see how that sometimes the choice of words, the choice of wording that impact the perceptions and the feeling of other party, what you are saying. Now, for example, whatever proposals you are stating to your higher ups, maybe to your advisor, maybe to anyone, state your proposal in terms of what potential gains other party stands to forego if your proposal is not accepted. So what are the gains other party is going to lose? So basically you are highlighting loss impact, and there's a good likelihood that the other party would consider it seriously. For example, point out that the offer from our competitor does not give you X, Y, or Z, instead of pointing out that our offer gives you X, Y, and Z. So if they have a comparable, you are selling something, or if you're proposing something and there is another proposal on the table as well, pitch it in this way. The offer from our competitor ABC that does not give you XYZ, which means you are losing this, instead of pointing out that our proposal will give you these things. So that altogether will change the perception. Another tip is always disaggregate the gains and aggregate the losses. So which means if you have a positive news or positive thing to share, disaggregate it, spread it over time. But if you have a negative news or a negative thing to administer, do it at once. And I'll tell you the reason that why we should be doing it. For example, let me give you a scenario. Which of the following two situations would likely make you more happy? The first one is you're walking down the street and you find $1,000 or not dollar, dirham or dollar, whatever you say, bill. The second scenario is you are walking down the street and you find 500 dirham bill. The next day, as you are walking on a different street and you find another 500 bill. What do you think? Which situation will make you more happy? Scenario 1 or scenario 2? Anyone? Najla is saying scenario 2. Why? Any reason for that?
Yes, it's I would refer to the utility curve. It's like one gain would make me X happy. It doesn't have to be the amount, like the consecutive gains that I would take.
Okay. Okay, so you are saying scenario 2 would make you more happy. Okay. Now let me put another scenario here. Which of the following would make you more unhappy? You open your wallet and you discover that you have lost 1,000 dirham bill. And scenario Y is you open your wallet and you discover that you have lost $500 dirham bill. Now, in this case, what do you think? Which scenario, X or Y, would make you more unhappy?
I would
I'll
say
go
two
first.
also.
The first situation, you would say 2 also? Okay. Anyone? Okay. Swad is saying that 2 also. You're talking about the second scenario. Okay. Now, in first case, as a human being, the scenario 2 would make us more happy. And I'll tell you the reason why. And in scenario 2, when we say that what would make us more unhappy, again, the scenario 2 would make us more unhappy. And the reason why is this, because, for example, if today you get a salary raise of maybe 5,000 dirhams, how long that salary raise would keep you happy? The first day when you hear the news, you would feel happy, isn't it?
Yes.
The next day, probably that happiness, you will still feel happy, but that the level of happiness would not that be same what you were experiencing the first day. At the end of the month or at the end of the second month, it would be just a routine matter for you. Now, the idea is there's a concept in psychology which we say hedonic adaptation. Now, hedonic adaptation is, as a human being, we like all human beings, we live with some base level of happiness or unhappiness. So there is a straight line on which we are living. Whenever an event occur, a positive event occur, our happiness goes up, but it does not stay at the same level. After some time, we would return to that base level of happiness. So you will see that spike on the first day when that positive event occur, and then you come back. If I can draw it here, probably. Okay. So for instance, this is the base level of happiness, and a positive event occur, maybe salary raise. So your happiness level shoots up, but after some time, it will again come to down this to this base level. This is base. Okay. Sorry for my poor writing. Okay. So this is base level. This is the spike, maybe the salary raise. When you get here, your happiness level shoots and then come back. So same happens for a negative thing. For example, if God forbids any death happens in your family, now your happiness level would go down, further down, but you will not stay here for long. After maybe few months, you would return to this base level. And this concept, this phenomena is known as hedonic adaptation. Hedonic adaptation, which means that as a human being, we tend to adapt to the new situation. So whenever a new situation happens, for good or for bad, that does not stay in our life forever. And once that event is over, the aftershocks are over, we tend to return to our base level of happiness. So if we want to increase happiness in our lives, what we ideally should be doing, we should get more of these spikes. So one spike is here, another spike is here, another spike is here, right? And we should be avoiding more of negative events so that we don't get downward dips. We should get one dip and return to base level. So for the negative things, dips should be, events should be, we tend to minimize negative events. For the positive thing, we tend to we tend to spread that, because we even don't want that we get a bigger spike like this, and then we return to the next 11 months we are just living on the straight line. No. Now you see that this has applications the way organizations are distributing rewards. Now, for example, if you have to offer a salary raise, if you have to offer a promotion, if you have to offer these non-monetary rewards like employee of the month, employee of the year, don't bundle them and don't give those at one point in time in the year. Because here, if you're offering a salary raise, you will get this spike. Here you offer a promotion, maybe here you offer employee of the month. So you will have opportunity to bring more spikes in the life of individuals. For example, if I have offered to, for example, my son was telling me that I need to, buy him a new PlayStation, a new laptop. I never ever do all these things in one go. I tell him, okay, I'm gonna give you this PS PlayStation now. After 6 months, after 8 months, we are going to buy laptop, and maybe after another 4 months, we are going to buy, another thing. The reason is, maybe after 1 week, the laptop, maybe the new laptop or the new PS4, that would be just an ordinary stuff, because by that time, my son has returned to his base level of happiness, and that PS4 or that computer is no longer, keeping him at this level. So the idea behind this is that we should disaggregate the gains, disaggregate the positive things, spread them over time, but the negative things, bundle them, just throw them in once, because otherwise if you disaggregate the negative things, you will have more of downward dips or this downward spikes. Okay. So this is what I just told you. So how can you use this principle? If you have the ability to make concessions, do not make them all at once. Break your concessions into smaller concessions. Spread them over time. And if you have good news to share, try to parcel the information into smaller pieces. This will give the other party more occasions to smile, more upward spikes. And if you have benefits and rewards to offer, separate them into installments so that you can make over time, as I just explained. And if you have bad news to share, share it at once. Don't disaggregate it. If you have costs or burdens to impose, combine them into one. Okay, last thing. Leverage the power of justification. People get more influenced, and people tend to accept more of your requests when you give justification. If I tell you, I will leave you early, or I will end this workshop 15 minutes earlier without giving any justification, probably it would be like you will be less convinced that I should leave early. I'm just giving an example. But if I tell you the justification that I have to leave 15 minutes early because I have to pick my kid from the school, I have a dentist appointment, I have to go to the dentist. Now you feel more convinced to agree to my request. So whenever you are asking someone for something, that should be backed up with a justification. Now, that always helps the other individuals to accept your request. If you want to take a leave, now that you should have a justification and a valid justification. For example, this experiment was done in Harvard University. The researcher first, like he or she wanted to cut the queue to use the photocopier machine. And he said, the first time the researcher said, excuse me, I have 5 pages, may I use the Xerox machine? Now 60% of the time he was allowed to cut the line or to jump the queue. And the next, in another version, the researcher did a little bit tweak the way he was saying things is, excuse me, I have 5 pages, may I use the Xerox machine because I have to make some copies. Now that in 95% of 93% of the time, he was allowed to cut the line. So if you give justification, people, for example, even if you are jumping queue, you are standing at the airport, if you give justification that you want to move ahead because of XYZ, you will see that people are willing to accommodate you, no matter in what queue you are standing. But if you don't give justification and just say, I want to jump queue or just move on, people always react. They are not going to get influenced and persuaded by what you are saying. Because as a human beings, we are hardwired to accommodate the legitimate demands justified. So provide a justification and follow that up with evidence to support this justification. That always helps in convincing, in influencing, persuading others. So that is the end. Thank you very much. We still have 4 more minutes. Unfortunately, we don't have much time. I wish we could have done this in a face-to-face setting. Then it would have been more collaborative, more, ideas and exchanging thoughts. But I hope you might have learned few, things which probably you can use in your daily life, in your work life, to use these principles. Knowing is not important until unless you start practicing. You will not learn. You will not learn. You will not polish your skills. Yes, Ahmed Sultan.
Yes, thank you so much, Doctor, for this very nice presentation. I just have a question.
Yes.
Sometimes when you go for like a job interview and you actually got the job, and they make you sign the contract of agreement saying that this is what's done, right? And they try to force you in a nice way, just like you explained earlier.
Yeah.
How can I react to that? If I want to increase, let's say, my salary, or I'm not happy with the agreement itself, like if I need more working or less working hours or something like that.
I think I can send you. There's a very good reading, and I think probably I had some plans because I'll be offering another workshop in the next semester, which is on negotiation skills. And there is a very good reading by this Deepak Malhotra. He is known as the guru of negotiation, and the title of the reading says how to negotiate your first offer. So that gives you some tips, because the idea is when we tend to negotiate with our future employer, we are also creating a perceptions. We are also giving a signal. Now, for instance, if I am very much stubborn on the salary, probably I am giving a signal that I'm a greedy person. If I'm very much stubborn on the working hours, I want them to reduce my working hours. I'm giving a signal that maybe I'm a work shirker. I don't want to work much. I don't want to put in much. So this is a kind of tricky, business. So I am just telling you the other side of the story as well. So this is kind of a tricky business that whenever we tend to negotiate, especially for the job offers, we are also communicating certain, what you say, impressions about ourselves. And those things sometimes hurt us if we tend to, make our career in that organization. So from that perspective, I would say that whatever you want to negotiate, try to think from this perspective as well. Don't try to push too hard. Don't try to like there's a limit, and there are certain things on which you can negotiate, and there are certain things I think you should not be negotiating, because that carries a negative impression about you. And another tip for this is, and this is what is mentioned, I think Najla mentioned this, the name of the book, The Negotiation Genius. That is a masterpiece by Deepak Malhotra, and you can read that. Another thing is, if your employer is, for example, not giving or not accepting or not accommodating you on one request, you should try to get a favor on another request, which probably is not much important to the employer. Now, for example, let me give you an example. If your employer says you tend to negotiate on salary and employer is very much stubborn on the salary, and the employer says, okay, our financial situation is not good and we have equity issues. So probably if we give you this, for instance, if you give you a higher salary, we are going to lead ourselves internal problems, equity issues inside the organization. Okay, that's fine. But in return, which means now you are giving a favor to the employer that you have accepted employer's request. Do not give unilateral favors. In return, you can ask and you can negotiate on something which is probably less important for the employer, but maybe important for you. For example, you can ask for maybe your desired department in which you want yourself to be posted. Maybe this is something which is not of much worth to the employer, but for you, this is something very good. You can ask for maybe the region in which you want to be posted. Maybe this is something not much worth to the employer, but for you, this is of more important. So the idea is that do not push too hard on certain things. Instead, try to negotiate or try to work on those things which probably are less important from employer's perspective, but from your perspective, those negotiating on those things or getting those things might be useful for you. So this is my take on your question. Okay, Sultan, Ahmed Sultan. Okay, any other question? Okay, great. Thank you very much. And please do fill the feedback, because that always helps me to develop myself further, to learn from the feedback of the participants. Thank you very much. Take care. Best of luck.
Thank you so much, doctor. Thank you so much.
Bye.